Hi, my name is Jonathan Rogers, and today I'm here to discuss none other than Michael Brauer, the four-time Grammy-winning mix engineer, whose elaborate mix techniques and incredible sounds have given us some of today's most recognizable pop records. His career began in media sound in New York in 1976, with his first big break coming when he got to mix for Luther Vandross on a record called Change. Uh, that led to a 4 year stint recording for Aretha Franklin, after which he flew to London and cut his teeth as a young mix engineer, doing a lot of mixes and remixes for a number of different studios before returning to the American scene to work on music here. His Grammys, which of course we have to mention, have been awarded for his work on Tony Bennett's Album of the Year, Unplugged, Coldplay's Alternative Album of the Year, Parachutes, and John Mayer's Best Pop Vocal Album, Continuum. There's a bunch of stuff I've seen about Michael Brauer on Pensado's Place. I've read about him in Sound on Sound and a couple of other sources. And some of his attitudes are really refreshing to hear coming from a stable mix engineer from who's been here since the old school, if you want to put it that way. And a lot of his attitudes regarding digital plugins, tape, etc. Are a lot different than what a lot of the old school engineers say. First of all, he says that tape is too slow a method. Not that he doesn't like its sonic characteristics; he loves that. But he says it's too slow to have artists sitting around a studio, wondering what's happening. While tape rewinds. Although he says he misses the pause, and when you rewind tape, you could go for a cigarette or take a break or rest your ears from a mix, and he misses that rest period that with Pro Tools you don't get. You hit return and you're back at the top of the track, ready to work again. Interestingly, his attitudes regarding digital versus analog, he says that there's no discussion, referring, when it comes to analog versus digital. He says if you like it, you use it, which is really refreshing to hear. I for one want to buy into the fact that analog is better than digital, and that digital will never be able to emulate analog, so that the gear is justified. So that when I go into a job after Full Sail, I hopefully get to use all that hardware. But unfortunately, that's probably not the case. And as he says, there are certain PCs that they will never manage to recreate because of individual PCs' behaviors and sounds that they have. But, he says by and large he's been won over, and if you like it, you should use it. He says that the problem was that with a lot of early digital gear, there was a certain intrinsic harshness that they had. That a lot, although now with technology, that the harshness is not a problem anymore, and a lot of it's starting to recreate the fullness that could be achieved with analog gear. Um, and I think that's interesting because I think a lot of engineers in the past would have dreamt about surgical EQs which had no coloration, no effect, that could allow you to go in, pinpoint a frequency, and remove it. And we have those things. Those things are now easily readily available, but they lack character, they lack substance, and we now strive to have things like Neve EQs and SSL EQs inside our computers because they made decisions for us when they designed these EQs. A human's ear was responsible for how some of those things sounded, and human intuition and intuition led to the decisions that were made as to what frequency bands were available, whether it was an adaptive cue, etc. All these little decisions that the designers made along the way led to something that was gratifying, that was pleasing on the ear, and that's not what you get with a clean mathematical EQ. So we're trying to refine some of that character that we've lost in the move from analog to digital, and I think that's where Michael Brauer manages to walk that line very well. I mean, at the end of the day, he says that he's more interested in hearing emotion and the feeling of something than hearing the EQ or the equipment that's on a track, and I think that's extremely important. He said, when he became an engineer, he was extremely concerned that he may lose what it feels like to perform. He used to be a drummer, but he says he doesn't drum anymore. He felt quite lost behind a kit that he sat down behind recently, and I think that says a lot about whether or not he felt the need. He obviously never felt like he stopped performing. As an engineer, he probably still feels as if he has a performing role on a track, and I think that's maybe subtle and underlying, but I think it's very important to take away from him. Um, He's responsible for the multi-bus compression technique, his attitudes with regards to parallel compression. I would love to go on and discuss some of that in detail, but there's an excellent explanation of his multi-bus compression technique and why that's not parallel compression on Pensado's place. And there's a slightly more up to date gear list of what he runs on his A, B, C, and D buses on Sound on Sound's article, "The Secret of Mix Engineers," Michael Brauer, discussing the Vida Loca album, I believe it is. He discusses a little bit more of the actual compressors he's using on the individual buses to tailor his sound for height and in the recording, and that's probably really worth a look. I really could go on all day, but I just personally, I just really respect his ability to blend sounds, make things sound natural. The way a vocal sits in a mix, I am always looking for elaborate mix techniques. That's something that interests me very much, and he's been a very forthcoming and very generous with his knowledge online and in articles and media, and I'm extremely grateful for that. Because it's refreshing to see somebody who's not held back in these interviews. So, anyway, thank you very much for listening, and see you later.